I want to just share some comments about the passing of the former Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney. First of all, I want to pass on my condolences on behalf of all New Democrats to the friends and family who've lost a loved one, and also condolences to the country. There's a significant loss of a Prime Minister and someone who gave a lot of his life to public service. I want to talk a bit about that contribution to Canada. Prime Minister Mulroney was known for his environmental advocacy. He's someone that led the charge in fighting back against acid rain and the hole in the ozone. Things that folks might recall from the 80s, it was a serious concern. And what Prime Minister Mulroney did was actually build a global consensus around how we could work collectively as a world towards dealing with environmental challenges, and successfully did so. And I want to acknowledge that. Prime Minister Brian Mulroney was a true progressive conservative. And in that, he led the charge in fighting back against apartheid in South Africa, something that, again, made Canadians feel really proud to see the Prime Minister take such a strong stance at a time when people weren't really, maybe people were more timid. He took a very strong stance in opposing that horrible practice, discriminatory practice, and he made Canadians feel proud to see that happen. He also did something that I find quite remarkable in that he made sure Quebecers felt like they belonged in Canada. For a long time, folks that know the history, Quebecers were often made to feel like they were second-class citizens. People who spoke French in general felt that way. And probably because Prime Minister Mulroney was from Quebec, knew some of that sentiment, and really spent time to make sure people of Quebec felt like they belonged in Canada. And that, to me, is something notable. I really believe that that is a trait worth acknowledging and recognizing, someone that wants to make sure people felt like they belong. A couple other things that people might not know about, and I want to share with you recently when we were mourning the loss of Ed Broadbent. Folks might have heard Prime Minister Mulroney's voice in a comment that he provided about someone who was actually his opponent, but someone who he respected as well. That comment was given, it turns out, while Prime Minister Mulroney was actually in the hospital himself, dealing with a health crisis. And the thought of someone dealing with a health crisis, taking the time to share some kind words about a political opponent, really is a testament to the kind of person Prime Minister Mulroney was. And it's something, again, also worth recognizing that that type of statesperson and that type of graciousness. Also, another story that my team shared with me, and I'll wrap with this story, is that folks have mentioned that he was kind and generous with everybody. And on that note, when Jack had elected a number of members of parliament from Quebec, the largest ever for the NDP, and a significant number of MPs from Quebec for any party, he wanted some advice on the best way to work with such a large team from Quebec. And he actually reached out to former Prime Minister Mulroney and was able to get some advice from him. Again, that spirit of generosity and willingness to speak to people, even if they're from different political parties. So I want to, again, express, on behalf of all New Democrats, our condolences for the passing to the friends and family, but also to the nation on the passing of Prime Minister Mulroney. I'll do that in French, and then I'll be leaving. Je veux partager toutes mes condoléances aux familles et aux amis de l'ancien Premier ministre Brian Mulroney. Je veux noter, il était vraiment une progressiste, un conservateur progressiste, et c'est quelque chose qu'on doit noter. Le fait qu'il a travaillé fort pour protéger l'environnement, c'est quelque chose qu'on doit noter. Elle a aussi se battre contre la pratique discriminatoire en Afrique du Sud. Aussi, elle a fait un grand travail, un travail acharné pour s'assurer que le Québec se trouve une place au Canada. Et c'est important de noter ça parce que si on regarde l'histoire du Québec et l'histoire des francophones au Canada, il était souvent traité comme des classes secondaires, traités dans une façon mauvaise. Et ce que Premier ministre Mulroney a essayé de faire, c'est de dire, vous êtes bienvenus ici au Canada. Et elle a fait ça avec des mesures concrètes. Et je veux reconnaître ça. C'est un élément important d'une chef qui essaie de s'assurer que les gens sont inclus dans notre société. Et c'est un travail que je veux aussi continuer. Je veux aussi partager une histoire de qu'est-ce qu'il a fait récemment. Premier ministre Mulroney a partagé des bons mots pour reconnaître le passage de Ed Broadbent. Et on a été vraiment touchés par ça. Mais ce que peut-être tout le monde ne sait pas, c'était le fait que quand Premier ministre Mulroney a partagé ces mots pour parler de Ed Broadbent, il était à l'hôpital. Ça veut dire qu'il a eu un problème de santé lui-même. Il a pris, malgré ça, il a pris le temps de partager des mots pour quelqu'un qui était un adversaire. Donc, ça, c'est quelque chose que je pense montre le caractère de Premier ministre Mulroney. En fait, je veux encore répéter, je veux partager encore mes condoléances aux familles, aux amis et aussi au Canada, parce que c'est une perte pour tout le Canada. Merci.
I've got to ask you, in the obit that CBC Television has put on the air, there's a picture of Audrey McLaughlin, then NDP leader, leading a protest against the GST. Many of your members disliked Mr. Mulroney's policies. They may even believe they disliked him. Could you unpack, please, what it's like for your members to look at the legacy of Mr. Mulroney now when so many of them disliked or worked everything they had to stop them?
Well, there's certainly going to be many examples of disagreements that many New Democrats had with some of the policies. But today is the day to reflect on his contributions. And I can say with a lot of confidence he did have significant contributions to Canada. And there are things that we can agree with. His work on environmentalism, his work on fighting apartheid in South Africa, and his work on trying to include Quebec. These are things that are notable and are things worthy of recognizing. And I think today is a day to focus on his contributions and where we can recognize those good contributions. I think that's the point of today.
What do you think there is to learn about what he accomplished in Quebec and the way that he sort of managed to marry the nationalist movement with sort of a unified Canada?
I think there's a lot to be learned from the way Prime Minister Mulroney really took time to make sure the people of Quebec felt like they belonged. That is an example of not just for Canadians to follow, but around the world, where there's disagreement, where there's a feeling of not being welcome, not belonging, where different parts of a country feel like they're being ignored. Instead of feeding into that, instead of allowing that to continue, he really did a remarkable job of making sure it was clear to the people of Quebec that he was trying to make sure they felt included. That's something that we should continue to do for all parts of Canada now, and it's something that other leaders around the world could learn from. The way he had the patience and the wisdom to try to make sure people who've often felt ignored and neglected felt like they belonged.
Quelle leçon tirez-vous de justement son approche par rapport au Québec dans votre façon maintenant d'agir comme chef?
Oui, je suis tellement je suis tellement reconnaissant de comment Premier ministre Mulroney a vraiment essayé fort d'inclure le Québec et les Québécois. Et je pense que ça, c'est vraiment important si on regarde l'histoire, le contexte du Québec. Le Québec a été toujours traité comme moins important. Les francophones en général ont subi la discrimination. Donc, son travail était un travail vraiment important pour le pays, pour l'idée de comment on peut travailler ensemble et pour l'idée d'unité. Le fait qu'il a vraiment travaillé fort sur cette idée d'inclure le Québec, c'est quelque chose qui m'inspire aussi. Je pense que c'est exactement ce qu'on doit faire pour toutes les provinces, toutes les régions de notre pays. On doit travailler fort pour s'assurer qu'ils sont inclus dans la vision pour un pays où tout le monde peut réussir. Et pour le Québec, c'est une inspiration pour moi, cette idée de s'assurer que le Québec, avec l'identité unique du Québec, comment on peut travailler pour s'assurer qu'ils sont inclus, ils sont bienvenus dans un pays comme Canada où on peut bâtir un meilleur avenir ensemble. Merci. Thank you so much.
Pharmacare?